Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this video is a quick preview for Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Chris Arreola. Now this fight goes down on the 1st of May, takes place at the Dignity Health Sports Park in Carson, California, formerly known as the StubHub Center of course. Now, in America, this fight is actually on Fox pay-per-view. Now, while being in the UK, that doesn't affect me. Nevertheless, I think it's a bad look putting this fight on pay-per-view. First and foremost, when you look at this fight on paper, it doesn't really appear to be a competitive matchup. I mean, if you've watched Chris Arreola in the last few years, you would realise that this guy is well past his best. Yeah, don't get me wrong, he looked okay against Adam Kownacki, but in hindsight, how good really was Adam Kownacki? I mean, he was beating guys like Artur Szpilka and Gerald Washington, who were never great heavyweights. So, you know, Adam Kownacki aside, Chris Arreola's really not been looking good in recent years. Of course, back in 2016, he got beat up by Deontay Wilder and stopped. He looked terrible in the Travis Kaufman fight. He won that fight, but in my opinion, he lost. He looked awful against Fred Cassie. He drew that fight. He got a fortunate decision against a journeyman by the name of Chris Harper. He got knocked out by Bermane Stiverne in their rematch. So, you know, in recent years, Chris Arreola's not been looking impressive. I mean, I would say Chris Arreola's last impressive performance was against Seth Mitchell, and that was back in September 2013. It's been a long time since Chris Arreola's looked good. And, you know, ultimately, I give him no chance in this fight whatsoever to beat Andy Ruiz Jr. Yeah, he might make it fun for the first 2 or 3 rounds, but ultimately Andy Ruiz at this stage will be way too much for him. Of course, Andy Ruiz, former heavyweight champion, beat Anthony Joshua in their first fight, had a close fight with Joseph Parker. You know, Andy Ruiz has always been very talented, but he's not really had the dedication to go with that. Now he's training with Eddie Reynoso, and it appears that he's making good progress in the gym, losing weight, working out with great fighters, you know, a lot of motivation around him. It finally appears that Andy Ruiz Jr. is taking his career seriously, and that combined with how bad Chris Arreola's looked in recent years, I really expect Andy Ruiz to do a job on him, you know, beat him up and then stop him. I would imagine in the middle rounds. Arreola's got a decent chin, it will take a few shots, but I fully expect Andy Ruiz to chop this guy down and take him out. And also stylistically, you know, Chris Arreola, not the biggest heavyweight in the world, he's not the quickest, he's kind of slow, defensively lapse. Against a quick-handed guy like Andy Ruiz, who's got good timing, nice combinations, the style of Chris Arreola will perfectly complement Andy Ruiz's style, and it should make Andy Ruiz Jr. look pretty good. And ultimately, I think that's the reason why this fight's even been made, because Chris Arreola will make Andy Ruiz Jr. look like $1 million. I think it's very selective matchmaking, and they've chosen Chris Arreola for a reason. So yeah, I fully expect Andy Ruiz to win this fight. I don't envisage this guy having any problems whatsoever, and if he does, you know, that's not really a good look, if we're being honest. And yeah, all in all, Andy Ruiz Jr., as we know, he's been out of a ring for quite some time. Last fought in December 2019 against Joshua, where he lost on points. It's been a long time since he's fought, well over a year now. So I've got no problem with Andy Ruiz taking this sort of fight as a comeback. The real problem is that it's on pay-per-view in the States, and again, that doesn't affect me, but of course I want to see boxing be, you know, available to all fans, and, you know, certain fights have to be put behind a paywall, we get that, but there's no reason to make this fight pay-per-view. It's not competitive enough, it's not interesting enough, and even when you look at the undercard, I mean, look at the undercard, it really isn't great whatsoever. I mean, you've got the prospect Sebastian Fundora, he's fighting Jorge Cota. That's an okay fight, it's a good little test, but once again, Fundora should win that fight. You've got Omar Figueroa versus Abel Ramos. Again, fun fight, but nothing really to write home about. I mean, the undercard itself also is not looking great, so the fact that this fight is on pay-per-view, I definitely feel for you guys out in the United States. I know it's at a reduced rate, but still, even then, this fight should not be getting put behind a paywall as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I think that is a bad look. But ultimately, you know, this fight basically is a comeback fight for Andy Ruiz. It's a tune-up fight, and it's a fight to make him look good, basically. And I think it's a bit of a disgrace that it's on pay-per-view. I mean, if Andy wanted to come back to pay-per-view, at least fight someone like Luis Ortiz. I know you may say, well, Luis Ortiz is ancient, he was always overrated, and he's past his best. And yeah, that may be true to a certain extent, but even this version of Luis Ortiz would handily beat Chris Arreola, and it's a much more competitive fight than Ruiz versus Arreola. It's just that simple. But yeah, I fully expect Andy to win this fight. I fully expect him to win by stoppage. Hopefully, he can make a statement and put his name back up there amongst the top heavyweights. I mean, after this fight, I'd love to see Andy Ruiz fight Deontay Wilder. I think that would be a massive fight in the United States. You know, Wilder's got his fan base, and we all know what happened against Tyson Fury. A lot of people are wondering where Deontay Wilder's at right now. There's a lot of intrigue with Deontay Wilder, so there's going to be a lot of interest in his next fight. And as we know, the Hispanic audience will definitely support Andy Ruiz Jr. So if we put those two guys together, I'm sure that Ruiz versus Wilder would do great numbers in the States on pay-per-view. That's a pay-per-view fight. Ruiz versus Wilder, I think it's a great fight. So that's what I'm looking for after this fight. After Ruiz fights Arreola, I really want to see Wilder versus Ruiz. I think it'll be a great fight. But yeah, in short, all in all, I've got no problem with Andy Ruiz taking Arreola as a comeback fight. It's just a bad look, this being on pay-per-view. It doesn't do anything for boxing. It doesn't do anything for boxing fans. And ultimately, I don't care whether I'm not in the United States. I want to see boxing fans across the board get the best deal possible. And let's be honest, this fight does not represent that. So yeah, that's why I talked about the pay-per-view. But yeah, I mean, share your thoughts below. What do you make of the main event? Do you believe Chris Arreola can be competitive, or like me, do you believe Andy Ruiz is going to blow him away? And also, what do you think of the undercard? And also, yeah, if you want my official prediction, I would say Andy Ruiz by a mid-round stoppage. That's my prediction for this fight. But anyway, share your thoughts below on this fight, on this card, and share your predictions as well. I've seen nobody pick Chris Arreola in this fight, and that really says it all, to be honest. But yeah, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. Hit the like, smash subscribe. Peace.